Rich and tiny nations like Singapore, San Marino, Luxembourg, and Switzerland benefit from advanced financial industries, tax policies, skilled labor, substantial bank deposits, and profitable natural resource deposits. Countries like Qatar and the United Arab Emirates also have significant natural resource deposits. Macao, Asia's gambling mecca, remains among the wealthiest governments despite sporadic lockdowns and travel restrictions. To measure a nation's relative wealth, a country's population divided by the number of full-time inhabitants is more accurate. Purchasing power parity, PPP, helps determine a country's average standard of living. So remain with me to the end if you're excited to learn about the world's most affluent nations. Let's go. Number 10. The US. America's rise into and remaining in the top 10 can be partly attributed to declining energy costs, as well as state expenditure that came by the epidemic and other economic stimulus programs. Whereas some petroleum-based economies such as Qatar, Norway, and the United Arab Emirates saw a decline in their ranks due to falling oil prices, while Brunei was totally excluded from the top 10. Number 9. Norway. Interestingly, Norway has relied heavily on oil as its economic engine since the late 1960s, when significant offshore deposits were discovered. Being the leading petroleum producer in Western Europe, the nation has profited from rising prices for many years. The GDP of Norway decreased by 6.3% in the second quarter of that 2020, marking the worst loss in 50 years and may be the largest since World War II. Does that imply that Norwegians' level of wealth decreased dramatically from before the pandemic? Without a doubt. Following the initial shock, the economy progressively recovered and reduced its losses. Just so you know, Norwegians may always rely on their $1.3 trillion sovereign wealth fund, the largest in the world, for assistance with any unanticipated economic issues. Furthermore, Norway's high per capita GDP estimates represent the ordinary person's economic well-being quite well, in contrast to many other wealthy countries. The nation has one of the least differences in income inequality globally. Number 8. San Marino. Little San Marino is the 5th smallest country on the map and the oldest republic in Europe. Despite having just 34,000 residents, it has among of the richest populations worldwide. The extremely low income tax rate, roughly 1/3 of the EU average, helps. But San Marino has been making efforts to align its fiscal rules and regulations with both international standards and those of the European Union. This little country has shown incredible fortitude both during and after the epidemic in the face of severe financial limitations and the energy crisis, with its industrial and tourist sectors seeing particularly robust growth. Number 7. United Arab Emirates. Pearl commerce, fishing, and agriculture used to be this Persian Gulf nation's 3 primary economic sectors. Everything changed in the 1950s when oil was discovered. The extremely cosmopolitan populace of the United Arab Emirates, UAE, is wealthy today. Just 20% of the population is native to the nation. Workers are drawn here from all over the world by tax-free earnings and year-round sunlight, while traditional Islamic architecture coexists with opulent retail malls. Additionally, the economy of the UAE is diversifying more and more. Major sectors outside of the hydrocarbon industry that has historically dominated the economy are tourism, construction, commerce, and banking. This is not to argue that the epidemic and the ensuing decline in oil prices did not have an influence on the United Arab Emirates. Quite the contrary. As unbelievable as it may sound, the United Arab Emirates momentarily disappeared off the IMF's list of the world's richest nations for the first time in many years. But then, fossil fuels are still in vogue. The United Arab Emirates promptly reclaimed its traditional ranking among the world's top 10 richest nations as soon as energy costs began to rise. Number 6. Switzerland. Among some of the notable innovations that Switzerland is known for are Velcro, LSD, computer mice, immersion blenders, bobsleighs, white chocolate, and Swiss Army knives. This 8.8 million person nation owes a large portion of its riches to banking and insurance services, travel, pharmaceutical items, jewelry, precious metals, precision instruments like watches, and machinery, including computers and medical equipment. According to Credit Suisse's 2023 Global Wealth Report, Switzerland topped the list with an astounding $685,230 in average wealth per adult. Moreover, around 1 in 6 adults has assets valued at more than $1 million. Is it any wonder that Switzerland boasts the world's greatest density of millionaires? Number 5. Macao Special Administrative Region. A few years back, a lot of people were placing bets that Asia's version of Las Vegas will soon overtake all other countries in terms of wealth. After the gambling sector was liberalized in 2001 in this former Portuguese Empire territory, the People's Republic of China's Special Administrative Area has witnessed an incredible increase in riches. Nestled just south of Hong Kong, this little peninsula became a money-making engine with over 40 casinos spanning a region of around 30 square kilometers and a population of about 700,000. That is, until the machine began to lose money instead of making it. Travel throughout the world ceased when COVID hit, and Macau briefly dropped off of the list of the 10 richest countries. Macau is gradually getting back to its regular schedule today. Even still, the per capita buying power is still much lower than it was prior to the global health emergency. It was over $125,000 in 2019 and is currently down by over $25,000. Number 4. Qatar. Oil prices have generally decreased since the middle of the 2010s, except the recent rebound. A Qatari citizen's per capita GDP was above $143,222 in 2014. A year later, it sharply declined and stayed below $100,000 for the next 5 years. That amount has, however, progressively increased, rising by around $10,000 a year. Nevertheless, Qatar's 2.7 million people and abundant oil, gas, and petrochemical reserves allow this wonder of contemporary architecture, opulent retail centers, and exquisite food to maintain its position as the richest country in the world for 2 decades. All wealthy nations do not, however, exist without issues. In the early months of the epidemic, COVID-19 spread quickly among low-income migrant laborers living in cramped quarters, leading to one of the highest percentages of positive cases in the area, despite the fact that only 12% of the population is Qatari. Then, when energy costs declined, so did income for the public and private sectors. Qatar's export-driven economy was negatively impacted by the interruption of international commerce resulting from the conflict in Ukraine. Nevertheless, the economy has shown itself to be adequately robust. In 2024, it is expected to expand by 2.1% and the following year by 3.7%. Number 3. Singapore. With an estimated net worth of $15.6 billion, Li Shiting, the founder of Mindray, a company that makes medical equipment, is the richest person in Singapore. Robert and Philip Ng, brothers and real estate developers, are ranked second and third, respectively, after Goh Chung Liang of Wuthalam Holdings, a paint and coatings manufacturer. Eduardo Saverin, the co-founder of Facebook, comes in at number 4 with assets worth around $9.6 billion, albeit he held the top slot for a long time. In 2011, Saverin departed the United States with 53 million shares of the firm and moved to the island country permanently. Not only is Singapore home to several natural gates and urban attractions, but Saverin also chose it because it is a wealthy fiscal haven with tax-free income and capital gains. However, how did Singapore manage to draw in so many wealthy people? Half of the people living in the city-state were illiterate in 1965, the year it gained its independence. Singapore, which has almost no natural resources, has become one of the world's most business-friendly destinations via hard work and astute policies. Currently, 98% of Singapore's adult population is literate, and the country is a booming center for commerce, industry, and finance. Sadly, this could not shield it from the pandemic-related worldwide economic collapse. In 2020, the country had its first recession in almost 10 years as a result of a 3.9% decline in GDP. Singapore's economy recovered in 2021, growing by 8.8%, although the rebound was halted by China's recession, a major trading partner. Singapore's manufacturing sector, which accounts for 21.6% of its GDP, was particularly severely impacted by China's economic woes. The economy grew by barely 1% in 2023, and in 2024 and 2025, it is not expected to increase much more than 2%. Number 2. Ireland. The Republic of Ireland, a country with only 5 million people, was among the most severely affected by the 2008 financial crisis. After implementing politically challenging reforms, such as drastically reducing public sector pay and reorganizing the banking sector, the island country was able to improve its employment rates, restore its fiscal stability, and witnessed exponential growth in its per capita GDP. But context matters. Being one of the biggest corporate tax havens in the world, Ireland helps multinational corporations significantly more than the typical Irish individual. Several major US companies, including Apple, Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Pfizer, relocated their fiscal domicile to Ireland in the middle of the 2010s in order to take advantage of the country's 12.5% corporation tax rate, which is among the lowest in the industrialized world. In 2022, the Central Statistics Office reported that these multinational corporations contributed more than 60% of the value added to the Irish economy. Ireland would lose its competitive edge if it adopted the 15% minimum corporation tax rate that the OECD has recommended and that many other nations have already put into place. Furthermore, according to OECD data, although Irish households are clearly in a better place than they were a few years ago, the country's household per capita disposable income is still somewhat below the EU average. Given the significant income disparity in Ireland, the top 20% make about 5 times as much as the bottom 20%. Most Irish people would probably object to the notion that they are not just wealthy, but the richest in the world. Number 1. Luxembourg. Luxembourg is worth visiting for its cuisine, delicacies, cultural events, and stunning scenery. Alternatively, you might just open an offshore account with one of its banks and leave the nation forever. It would be a shame to do otherwise because a tiny country of around 650,000 people, located in the center of Europe, has a lot to offer both visitors and residents. Luxembourg's citizens enjoy the highest standard of life in the Eurozone because a significant portion of their money is used to provide them with better housing, healthcare, and education. Luxembourg's economy may not have been significantly impacted by the global financial crisis or the EU and OECD's push to abolish banking secrecy, but the coronavirus epidemic resulted in the closure of several firms and the loss of employment for many employees. Nevertheless, the nation has fared better throughout the pandemic than the majority of its neighbors in Europe. In 2021, growth in the economy exceeded 7%, having recovered from a growth of -0.9% in 2020. Unfortunately, that recovery was short-lived, as the economy only increased by 1.3% in 2022 and even shrank by 0.4% in the previous year as a result of rising interest rates, the conflict in Ukraine, and a general worsening of the economic situation in the Eurozone. If you enjoyed watching, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bells for more updates. Thank you for watching.